I'd be happy to rewrite that introduction to make it more captivating. Here's a more engaging version. Welcome back to her Fireside Stories, where tonight we journey into the heart of betrayal, resilience, and unexpected redemption. Imagine this after decades of love and sacrifice. Eleanor Reed finds her suitcases lined up on the sidewalk outside her own home, the home she built with her husband, where she raised her son, and where she's still faithfully paying the mortgage. Evicted to the garage by her own son and daughter-in-law, Eleanor faces a devastating choice: fade quietly into invisibility or reclaim her power and her home. What follows is a stunning journey of self-rediscovery. When the tables turn and those who cast her aside come crawling back, will Eleanor choose revenge or reconciliation? The answer may surprise you. This powerful story of elder displacement speaks to anyone who's ever felt invisible or taken for granted. It reminds us that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and rebuild from the ashes of betrayal. I'm thrilled to share my house with you tonight. Remember to subscribe to her Fireside Stories for more tales that touch the soul. And let me know in the comments, have you ever had to reinvent yourself after a betrayal? Where are you listening from this evening now? Settle in as we discover how Eleanor transforms from discarded mother to the architect of her own magnificent second act. On the night I turned 63, the air in the suburbs of Boston was icy enough to sting my cheeks each time I breathed. I had just finished cleaning up dinner in my son's spacious kitchen, a place that, despite its warmth, never truly felt like home. The table was technically set for my birthday, but an undercurrent of tension clung to the house like a damp chill. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, came home late that evening, her features pinched and aggravated. An hour before, I'd prepared a small dish of creamy mushroom soup for myself, just a modest treat to mark my special day. Vanessa has a severe allergy to fungi, so I took every precaution, placing the soup far from the main dishes. Still, the moment she spotted it, her expression shifted from mild panic to icy anger. My son, Mark, tried to calm her, but ended up scolding me instead. I stood near the counter, hands trembling, unsure how to defend my small indulgence. Vanessa insisted my carelessness was endangering her life. She demanded that I leave the house for a few days until every trace of mushroom could be eradicated. There was no real discussion, only accusations mixed with her palpable fear. Mark's glare, though softer than her tirade, cut me just as sharply. In his eyes, I caught a glimpse of regret, yet he did nothing to protect me from her outburst. The tension felt suffocating. In that moment, I realized something had shifted in our dynamic. I was no longer seen as the nurturing mother who had once held the family together. Instead, I was an inconvenience. Their gleaming living room, with its polished hardwood floors and soft lighting, seemed to shrink around me. My heart pounded as Mark offered the so-called compromise, a handful of money and instructions to check into a nearby motel. "Mom, please understand," he said, placing several folded bills into my hand as though that might soften the sting of rejection. Gum. Just until Vanessa calms down. It's best for everyone. Outside, the wind howled, flinging icy crystals against the windows. My throat felt tight, and I struggled to speak. Every memory of raising Mark, how I'd worked 2 jobs after my husband passed, flashed through my mind like a dying light reel. Yet, the love and gratitude I once saw in his eyes had faded. All that remained was a look of weary impatience. He led me to a tiny makeshift sleeping space by the washer and dryer in the garage, as if that were a decent solution. But after hearing the night's forecast of a brutal temperature drop, he seemed to think better of it. Instead, he suggested the motel, Pressing the money closer to me, I found my voice at last, feeble though it was. "It's my birthday," I reminded him quietly. His eyes flickered with guilt, but he persisted. "We'll celebrate later, Mom, I promise." In the next room, Vanessa paced, refusing to speak directly to me. Her silence was as piercing as the words she'd already said. I grabbed a small suitcase, fingers shaking, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. Within minutes, I stood on their front steps, the cold wind biting through my coat. Mark hovered in the doorway, unwilling to meet my gaze. "I'll call you soon." "Mom," he repeated, sounding as though he were trying to convince himself more than me. Then the door clicked shut, leaving me outside under the bitter night sky. The taste of betrayal lingered on my tongue, and the promise of a warm bed in a cheap motel felt hollow compared to the warmth I had once believed to be my birthright. The motel's neon sign flickered in sickly pinks and greens, creating a kaleidoscope of light across the frozen parking lot. I clutched my coat tighter, my body still tense from the shock of being ushered out on my birthday. Inside, the lobby was as dreary as I expected: torn vinyl chairs, a stale coffee machine, and a receptionist who looked half asleep behind a battered desk. My thoughts churned as I approached her, the bills Mark had given me burning a hole in my pocket. She handed me a registration card, barely hiding her surprise that someone would be checking in at this hour. When I told her it was my birthday, her brow furrowed in sympathy. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. The words caught me off guard, almost unraveling my composure. Taking the key, I trudged down a dim hallway with stained carpet and flickering overhead lights. Just as I reached my door, the receptionist appeared behind me, a small box in her hand. "A little cake," she said shyly. "Strawberry shortcake. Happy birthday, ma'am." A wave of gratitude and sadness crashed over me as I took the box. Here was a stranger, offering a small kindness more genuine than anything I'd received from my own family that night. My throat tightened, and I barely managed to whisper a thank you. Inside the room, I flipped the light switch to reveal cracked wallpaper and a single bed with a faded floral blanket. The air felt damp, as though the heater hadn't been run in days. Setting my suitcase down, I opened the box. The shortcake was slightly squashed, a lone candle resting on top. I lit it, watching the gentle flicker reflect off the dingy walls. This was not how I'd imagined my birthday would end. I sat on the edge of the bed, biting back tears. Memories of previous birthdays surfaced: Mark as a little boy, proudly handing me a hand-drawn card. My late husband, David, whisking us out for a simple family dinner when money was tight. The sense of warmth and togetherness used to be the highlight of these occasions. Now that warmth felt unreachable. Exhausted, I changed into more comfortable clothes and tried to lie down. The springs in the mattress squeaked under my weight. The overhead light buzzed softly, adding a sense of eerie loneliness to the space. I closed my eyes, but the humiliating events of the night replayed in my mind. Had I really become such a burden to Mark and Vanessa that they'd force me out? I considered calling Mark, hoping he might realize how cruel this was. But a darker part of me whispered that he wouldn't answer, or worse, that he'd respond with the same dismissive tone. So I tucked the phone under my pillow. For a moment, I revisited the image of his face at the door, eyes darting away like a guilty child. It offered little comfort. Even if his guilt was genuine, it couldn't erase the sting of betrayal. Turning off the lamp, I huddled under the thin blanket and tried to chase away the cold seeping in through the walls. My 63rd birthday was almost over. All I had left was the faint sweetness of the half-eaten shortcake and the flicker of a candle that had already burned low. Somehow, amidst the sadness, a seed of determination took root. Tomorrow, I promised myself, I would do something different, anything to reclaim a sense of dignity. Morning arrived with pale sunlight creeping through the threadbare curtains. I woke stiff and disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was. Then the memory rushed back Mark's grim expression, Vanessa's furious eyes, the humiliating trek to this motel. My gaze landed on the half-eaten slice of cake, now congealed from the cold air. A spike of resentment stirred within me. I dressed quickly and headed to the front desk, returning the room key. The receptionist, the same kind woman from the night before, offered me a sympathetic look. Staying another night, she asked softly. I shook my head, unsure of where I'd go, but certain I couldn't afford to linger here. Money was tight, and my pride even tighter. Outside, a biting wind rustled my coat. I fumbled for my car keys, pausing to consider my options. The city felt unwelcoming now, overshadowed by my heartbreak. Then a memory surfaced of Seabrook, the small coastal town in Maine where I'd spent my childhood. My father had left me a rundown house there, an inheritance I'd never quite figured out what to do with. Maybe it was time to find out if that old place could still stand him. After a quick stop at a diner for a cup of coffee and a bagel, I climbed into my aging sedan. The engine sputtered before roaring to life. My muscles tensed as I pulled onto the highway. I gripped the wheel, the city skyline receding in my rearview mirror. Guilt, anger, and a fierce longing for something stable warred within me. If nothing else, Seabrook might offer a temporary shelter and a chance to think. The drive took a few hours. Along the way, the landscape shifted from towering concrete buildings to sprawling evergreens and the occasional farmhouse. Snow remnants clung to the roadsides, glinting in the morning sun. By midday, I glimpsed the sign for Seabrook. My heart fluttered with a mix of dread and nostalgia. It had been decades since I called this place home. The town looked smaller than I remembered, as though time had shrunk it while I'd been away. Quaint shops lined the main street, their roofs laden with patchy snow. I turned down a winding lane that led me toward the outskirts, where my father's house stood if it hadn't collapsed by now. An odd sense of comfort mingled with apprehension at the thought of returning to my roots. Pulling up to the property, I noticed the mailbox was rusted, the paint on the fence peeling. The house itself leaned slightly, like an old man in need of a cane. My hands shook as I parked and stepped onto the creaking porch. A wave of memories struck me, my father's laughter, my mother's cooking, the echo of my own small footsteps. I inhaled, drawing courage from the crisp sea air. After rummaging through my purse for the old key, I found it miraculously still fit the lock. The front door groaned open, releasing a stale odor of dust and abandonment. As I crossed the threshold, I couldn't help but feel I was entering a time capsule, a place that had waited, untouched, for my return. Whatever state it was in, this was my refuge now. Stepping into the house, I coughed at the swirl of dust kicked up by my footsteps. The living room remained furnished with relics from decades ago, a threadbare sofa, an old wooden rocking chair, and a small TV set with rabbit ear antennas. Faded floral curtains hung limply, letting only dim light filter through. Everything smelled of stale air and distant memories. I walked slowly, letting my eyes adjust. At least the roof hadn't caved in. My father's collection of antique plates still lined the mantel, each coated in a film of dust. An unexpected pang of guilt tugged at me. I hadn't visited since Mark was a small boy, and I'd never bothered to maintain the property. Now, it felt both like a relic and a possible lifeline. As I set my suitcase down, the floorboard squeaked, and I made a mental note to check for rotting wood. That was when a sharp rap sounded on the door. My heart jumped, half expecting it to be some official telling me the place had been condemned. Instead, I opened it to find a familiar face, Margaret Maggie Jensen, a childhood friend if friend was the right word. We'd oscillated between camaraderie and rivalry growing up. Maggie stood there, a confident grin on her face, and her curly hair pinned beneath a bright red beanie. "Evelyn Parker," she declared, her tone half amused, half curious. "I heard a rumor someone was poking around your old place. Didn't think it'd be you." Her eyes darted past my shoulder, taking in the dusty interior. A flicker of concern softened her gaze. I recalled the last time I'd seen her, at a funeral for a mutual friend. We exchanged polite words, but the distance between us was palpable. Now, she had a certain authority about her, like someone used to getting things done. I just got here," I replied. The wave of shame about my current predicament was almost overwhelming. Yet Maggie didn't press. She planted her hands on her hips. "This place looks like it hasn't been touched in years. You need a hand?" The question was oddly comforting, but pride flared in me. I half shrugged. "I'll manage. Just a little cleaning. Maybe some repairs?" Maggie snorted. "A little." "Huh. Look at that shutter," she said, pointing to one dangling precariously from the second-floor window. "I can round up a few folks to help you fix this up." Before I could protest, Maggie whipped out her phone. "I'm the women's community coordinator around here," she explained. "People actually listen to me now." "Who would have guessed?" She winked. I felt a smile tug at my lips, remembering how mouthy she'd been as a teenager. In minutes, she had sent texts to half a dozen residents. Not long after, a small group arrived carrying brooms, ladders, and toolboxes. Their collective energy was both overwhelming and heartening. Some introduced themselves, others simply nodded and got to work. In a whirlwind, they dusted, hammered, swept, and checked the plumbing. I stood off to the side, both grateful and flustered by their kindness. This wasn't the kind of reception I'd expected. But then again, this wasn't Boston, this was Seabrook, a place where people still believed in neighborly acts. By late afternoon, the crew had drifted away, promising to return the next day with more supplies. I strolled through the house, marveling at how quickly it had gone from desolate to livable. The biggest transformation was in the kitchen, where years of dust and cobwebs had been swept away. It still looked dated, with off-white cabinets and a dented fridge, but I could imagine cooking here again. Standing at the sink, I wiped a layer of grime off the faucet and turned the handle. Rusty water sputtered out, gradually clearing. The sound of running water seemed to awaken something in me, an old, familiar longing to cook. I recalled the meals I used to make for Mark when he was a boy, trying to stretch thin groceries into nourishing dinners. "Hey," Evelyn Maggie called from the doorway, startling me. She clutched a grocery bag in one arm, waving excitedly with the other. "Brought you a few basics. Figured you might need them." I blinked, stepping aside as she set the bag on the rickety table. Inside were eggs, milk, bread, a couple of tomatoes, and a small bag of onions. A modest but thoughtful spread. I tried to protest, saying I would pay her back, but Maggie brushed it off with a wave. "Just cook me something delicious sometime," she teased. Her tone held no malice, just genuine warmth. I felt a swell of gratitude, thinking how drastically different this was from the sterile politeness in Mark's home. No one here was shooing me away. They were actually inviting me in. Unable to resist, I rummaged around until I found an old pot. After washing it thoroughly, I chopped onions and tomatoes for a simple soup. The steady rhythm of the knife against the cutting board relaxed me. Maggie watched, occasionally handing me spices from the grocery bag. We worked in companionable silence, the aromatic scent of onions wafting through the small space. Osei. As the soup began to simmer, I recounted the last decade of my life in Boston, how I went from a restaurant cook to a part-time school cafeteria manager, then ended up moving in with Mark after my husband passed. I mentioned the tension with Vanessa, though I glossed over the details. Maggie nodded sympathetically, refraining from prying too deep. I was grateful for her tact. Soon, steam rose from the pot, and I stirred in a pinch of salt and some dried herbs we found at the back of a cupboard. The smell transported me to simpler times. With two mismatched bowls Maggie unearthed from a cabinet, we sat down at the small table. The first spoonful tasted like nostalgia, a reminder of how cooking had once been my way of caring for those I loved. Over dinner, Maggie spoke of her life in Seabrook, of organizing local charity events, and the tight-knit nature of the town. I listened intently, feeling a sense of awe at how she thrived here. She made it sound so welcoming. As I collected the empty bowls, she hinted that I might find my place again in Seabrook if I gave it a chance. I offered a small smile, letting a flicker of hope settle in my chest. Maybe I could rebuild here, one quiet day at a time. The next morning, dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that peeked through newly washed windows. I stretched, surprised at how well I'd slept on the lumpy sofa. There was an ache in my shoulders, but it felt like a small price to pay for the first real sense of peace I'd had in weeks. After brewing some weak instant coffee, I wandered the house to assess the remaining mess. My phone buzzed just as I began sweeping the living room floor. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Curious, I answered, my voice still scratchy with sleep. Hello, to my shock. The voice on the other end belonged to Thomas Reed, a former student I'd briefly taught cooking basics to in Boston during my school cafeteria job. Now, he was the principal at Seabrook Elementary. He got straight to the point. The school cafeteria was in dire need of help. They wanted to overhaul the menu, provide better nutrition, and maybe even have someone oversee a small dorm facility for the kids who boarded there. I heard from Maggie Jensen that you're in town. He explained. I pictured Maggie's smirk. She sure moved fast with local news. Principal Reed offered me a position $2,000 a month, plus free meals, plus a tiny on-site room if needed. The mention of a steady income made my heart skip. I'd been living off sparse savings and the bit of cash Mark had given me. More than that, I felt a stir of excitement about going back to cafeteria work. It might not be glamorous, but I loved the challenge of feeding kids healthy meals on a tight budget. Memories of my old cafeteria days came rushing back, clattering trays, smiling faces, the satisfaction of seeing children enjoy a meal I'd prepared. After promising to visit the school soon, I hung up and tried to process the offer. It all felt surreal. One moment, I was a mother cast aside on her birthday. The next, I was being offered a chance to reshape a school's food program. Hesitation gnawed at me. Did I really want to root myself here again? Then I recalled how Seabrook folks had rallied to help me. Perhaps this was a sign, a path to something meaningful. I texted Maggie, letting her know about the call. Her reply was almost instantaneous. Told you Seabrook needed you. I rolled my eyes, amused at her confidence in my potential. Yet her faith felt comforting, a stark contrast to the skepticism and disdain I'd grown used to in my son's home. I was still sorting my thoughts when Maggie showed up at my door, wearing her typical grin. Principal Reed. That's a lucky break, she said, stepping around me to place a bag of groceries on the kitchen counter. I know money's not everything, but the school needs a cafeteria revival, and you're just the person to do it. Why else would you end up back in Seabrook? I bristled slightly at her certainty, but couldn't deny the logic. The chance to do meaningful work was tempting, especially when my alternative was drifting aimlessly. We spent the rest of the day tidying the second-floor bedrooms. Amidst the cleaning, I made my decision. If the job was as needed as it sounded, I would take it. After all, I had little left tying me to Boston anymore, not after how Mark and Vanessa had treated me. My heart thrummed with cautious optimism. Tomorrow, I'd see the school, and maybe, just maybe, I'd find a new beginning. Seabrook Elementary was housed in a single-story building with a cheerful facade. Murals of sea creatures decorated the walls, and the distant echoes of children's laughter mingled with the brisk morning wind. I stepped inside, following Principal Thomas Reed's directions to his office. He greeted me with genuine warmth, his broad shoulders and easy smile still reminiscent of the teenager I'd once taught. "It's good to see you, Evelyn," he said, leading me down a hallway. "We've been limping along with a less than ideal cafeteria setup. Most of the meals come pre-packaged or heavily processed." He showed me the kitchen, where dated appliances and mismatched pots dominated the cramped space. I could almost smell the neglect, a mix of old cooking oil and canned vegetables. Thomas sighed. "Our lunch attendance is dropping. Kids prefer bringing their own meals or just snacking. And the dorm students, well, they're stuck with whatever we serve. We want to change that. We want healthy, appealing dishes, but we're on a tiny budget." His eyes held a glimmer of hope, as though he truly believed I could pull off a miracle. I studied the shelves of ingredients, mostly bulk pasta, canned tomato sauce, and an alarming number of sugary juice boxes. My mind whirred with possibilities: homemade soups, baked chicken, fresh salads if the budget allowed. With the right approach, even limited resources could be transformed into something better than bland microwave trays. He introduced me to a few teachers who passed through on their lunch breaks. Ms. Howard looked relieved when she heard of my background, telling me horror stories of students tossing out entire meals. Mr. Carter chimed in, describing children with stomach aches by midday because they refused to eat the cafeteria offerings. Their concerns piled onto my shoulders, but a spark of determination flared. I was confident I could help if I had the freedom to be creative. Yun. "Here's the formal offer," Thomas said, ushering me into his modest office. $2,000 a month, plus 3 daily meals. We can also provide you with a small dorm room if you want. We call it the matron's quarters. The dorm houses a handful of students whose parents can't commute daily. The figure wasn't huge, but it felt like a lifeline. I mulled it over as I gazed at a poster of fruits and vegetables pinned behind his desk. Accepting would mean committing to life in Seabrook at least for a while. I couldn't deny the appeal. After the chaos in Boston, a clear purpose awaited me here. "I'll do it," I replied at last, my voice surprisingly steady. "But I'll need to make some changes to the procurement list if we're going to serve healthy meals." Thomas grinned, relief evident in his posture. "That's music to my ears. We're thrilled to have you, Evelyn." As I left the office, a gentle warmth filled my chest. In the corridor, a few curious faces peeked from classrooms, as though word had already spread that the cafeteria was under new management. My mind buzzed with ideas: menus, budgets, possible recipes. For the first time in months, I felt a surge of excitement about tomorrow. After finalizing my paperwork at the school, I spent the afternoon wandering Seabrook's small commercial district. My aim was to find local produce suppliers and check prices, hoping to stretch every penny for the cafeteria. Ideas spun in my head: homemade chili with beans instead of ground beef, roasted vegetables instead of fried sides, and possibly bread pudding from leftover bread to cut down on waste. That evening, back at my father's house, I replayed the day's events. A mix of nerves and exhilaration clung to me. I found myself jotting notes on a notepad: meal plans, cost estimates, ways to store fresh ingredients in a subpar kitchen. My phone buzzed a message from Maggie asking how things went. "I'm officially the cafeteria manager," I typed back. Her reply of confetti emojis made me chuckle. Later, I remembered how, years ago, I'd once tried posting cooking videos online, simple tutorials for busy parents. Vanessa had dismissed the idea, claiming it exposed too much of our private life. Now, though, I was free to share my journey if I wished. The notion made my stomach flip with a mix of fear and excitement. Could I document the transformation of Seabrook Elementary's cafeteria for others to see? I opened my laptop, an older model that groaned whenever I clicked anything. Setting up a fresh account, I called it Grandma Eve's Cafeteria Quest. The name sounded folksy, but I liked it. It reflected my age, my nurturing approach, and my mission to revamp the school's lunches. Adjusting the built-in webcam, I filmed a short introduction. In the first take, my voice quivered. "Hello, I'm Evelyn Parker. Just call me Grandma Eve. I've been hired by a small elementary school to overhaul their cafeteria. We have a tight budget but big hopes. Follow along to see how we turn basic ingredients into healthy, tasty meals for kids." I felt silly, but also liberated. This was my story now, not Mark's or Vanessa's. I could share it however I wished. I uploaded the video, hesitating before clicking the final button that made it public. Who would watch something like this? Maybe only a handful of curious folks in Seabrook. Still, it gave me a surge of purpose. An hour later, I checked back to find a couple of views, probably Maggie and maybe Principal Reed. I shrugged. It was a start. The next day, I woke to a handful of encouraging comments. Someone suggested homemade soups to cut costs. Another person recommended local farmers who might donate surplus produce. My heart warmed as I realized these small interactions could help me build a network of supporters. The project felt less daunting with each bit of advice. Spurred on by the feedback, I grabbed my phone to record a quick vlog about inventory day at the school. I narrated the near-empty vegetable bins and the mountain of processed chicken nuggets in the freezer. "We can do better than this," I said, trying to sound hopeful. With that, Grandma Eve's Cafeteria Quest truly began a digital window into my attempt to feed young minds and find my own footing again in a world that had cast me aside. Monday marked my official start. I arrived early, inhaling the scent of disinfectant and stale oil that greeted me in the cafeteria. The kitchen lights buzzed overhead, illuminating the chipped counters and rows of dented metal trays. Anxiety clawed at my stomach, but I steeled myself. Kids would arrive soon, expecting something different. Two part-time assistants, Carla and Steve, greeted me by the sinks. Carla was a petite brunette juggling two jobs to support her own children. Steve, a retired Navy cook, liked to keep talk to a minimum but believed in old-school discipline. Both wore hairnets and aprons, looking mildly optimistic about new leadership. I nodded hello, then showed them a tentative menu I'd planned for the week. Baked chicken, brown rice, and steamed carrots simple. Yes, but far better than the pre-frozen fried patties they had been relying on. Carla whistled low. "We haven't done fresh chicken in, I don't even know how long." I glanced at the budget printout Principal Reed had given me. It would be tight, but if we portioned carefully, the school could afford basic staples. As we prepped, I set my phone on a countertop, recording snippets of the process for my channel. "Wash and pat dry the chicken thighs," I explained softly into the microphone. "Season with salt, pepper, a little garlic if budget allows." Steve looked amused but didn't comment. The smell of raw chicken soon gave way to the comforting aroma of roasting meat. Carla grated carrots, occasionally humming an upbeat tune. By the time lunch began, the cafeteria was buzzing with children. I poked my head out of the kitchen, observing their reactions. A boy eyed his tray skeptically before taking a hesitant bite of carrot. His face lit up, and he whispered something to a friend who followed suit. A proud warmth flared in my chest. This was why I loved cooking for kids when the meal was good. Their delight was genuine and immediate. Some had complaints, of course. The idea of brown rice wasn't universally adored, and a few missed the sugary juice pouches. But overall, the response was better than I had hoped. Several teachers passed through, sampling the food. One murmured that it was the first time she'd seen students finishing their carrots. I grinned, exchanging a knowing look with Carla. After lunch, I approached Principal Reed's office to debrief. He was beaming. Huge improvement, he said, thumbing through a few comment cards students had filled out. Keep it up, and we might boost attendance in the lunch program. I suggested some changes like replacing soda vending machines with water or milk alternatives, and he seemed open to it. Perhaps we were on the cusp of real progress. In the quiet that followed, I felt the weight of the day. My feet ached, and my mind reeled with ideas for tomorrow. But it was a good tiredness, the kind that comes from working toward a worthwhile goal. I snuck a look at my phone. There were new comments on my video, cheering me on. My heart swelled. In one day, I'd connected with children, begun building a healthier menu, and continued sharing the journey online. For the first time in a long while, I felt I was exactly where I needed to be, Jamie. My position included overseeing the small dormitory adjoining Seabrook Elementary. It was a modest wing with just 6 rooms for students whose parents worked distant jobs or had unusual schedules. On my first night patrolling the halls, I found mismatched sheets, a couple of squeaky bunk beds, and a laundry room that doubled as a storage space. Eggiso. The children ranged in age from 6 to 10. Shy or energetic, they carried anxieties about sleeping away from home. After the supper routine, where they ate leftovers from the cafeteria or quick sandwiches, I decided to introduce a bedtime ritual, warm milk and a short story. It reminded me of the times I'd nurtured Mark's bedtime habits, reading him tales of brave knights and friendly dragons. Some kids were immediately receptive. A boy named Hector shyly asked if I could teach him how to make a basic sandwich. Another, Rosie, clung to a stuffed dolphin and wouldn't say a word. Bit by bit, I realized how crucial stability was for them. Being dorm matron wasn't just about enforcing lights out. It was about providing a sense of comfort they might not get elsewhere. One evening, I found myself singing a lullaby under my breath, the same tune I used to sing to Mark as a baby. To my surprise, a couple of children leaned closer, as if the melody soothed them. Their soft giggles at my off-key notes filled the hallway. In moments like that, the heartbreak over my own son softened, replaced by a warm protectiveness for these little ones. During my off hours, I continued filming. I posted short videos about the dorm routine, careful not to show the kids' faces for privacy, and added small clips of bedtime snacks or story recommendations. My subscriber count inched upward, and some viewers began sending suggestions, cheap crafts to keep the children busy, lullabies from different cultures, and tips on bedtime hygiene. Principal Reed encouraged my dorm involvement, especially since the teachers often left after school hours, leaving the dorm kids in need of structured care. We discussed scheduling more consistent study times before lights out. That way, the children wouldn't fall behind academically. I agreed wholeheartedly, having seen the toll that chaotic routines took on students' morale. I tried to balance it all: meal planning, cooking during the day, dorm supervision at night, and filming for my channel in between. It was exhausting, yet oddly exhilarating. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I remembered how I'd once juggled multiple part-time jobs when Mark was young. But back then, I'd had no support. Now, I had Carla, Steve, Maggie, and even the supportive presence of Thomas Reed. Late at night, I'd collapse into the narrow dorm matron's bed, lulled by the quiet hum of heaters and the muffled sounds of sleeping kids. This was my new life, one that required constant giving. But in that giving, I found a sense of purpose that mended the fractures in my heart. If Mark and Vanessa could see me now, maybe they'd understand that I wasn't just someone to shunt aside. I was a caretaker, a guide, and I had no intention of letting anyone strip that away again. Over the next few weeks, life in Seabrook found a steady rhythm. Every morning, I rose early to plan and prep lunches. Carla and Steve became my trusted allies, each bringing new ideas to revitalize the cafeteria. I taught them how to season vegetables more creatively, and they showed me shortcuts for bulk cooking I hadn't tried before. Together, we experimented with hearty soups, baked fish, even homemade bread when the budget allowed. Enrollment in the lunch program rose sharply. Students were no longer wary of cafeteria food. Many requested seconds. My online channel, Grandma Eve's Cafeteria Quest, also saw gradual growth. Parents shared links, praising how their children came home, talking about the new lunch lady's yummy chicken or her special veggie wraps. Each positive comment felt like a small triumph. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID was unfamiliar, but I answered out of habit. To my surprise, it was Mark's voice on the other end. Tense, distant. "Mom, we need to talk," he began, skipping any greeting. My stomach twisted at the sound of his voice. Memories of that painful birthday night flooded back. He explained that he had been laid off amid company downsizing. Vanessa's marketing contract ended as well, leaving them both unemployed. Bills were piling up, and they feared losing their home. His voice held a note of desperation, though there was no hint of an apology for how they'd treated me. Instead, he seemed to assume I'd come rushing back to offer support. I felt anger flare, but also an ache of sympathy for my grandson, Jacob. None of this was his fault. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that Mark had shown no remorse or concern for my well-being after he and Vanessa cast me out. "I'm sorry for your troubles," I said carefully, "but I've made a life here in Seabrook. I can't just abandon it." He bristled. "Don't you care about Jacob? We can't give him the extracurriculars he needs without your help. You're still his grandmother." My heart clenched. Of course I cared, but the resentment I felt at being reduced to a financial resource overshadowed my guilt. "I love him, but I also recall how you treated me." I replied quietly, "I wish things were different, Mark." Silence stretched. Finally, he muttered something about how he never thought I'd be so selfish. My eyes burned. Selfish. After all the years I'd struggled to give him a good life, after I sacrificed my own home to help with his mortgage, I was now branded selfish, unable to continue. I murmured that I had to go and ended the call. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I sank into a nearby chair. Despite all the progress I'd made in Seabrook, my family ties still bound me with guilt and sorrow. That evening, though, I returned to the dorm, where several children greeted me with playful smiles, showing off their drawings from art class. Their genuine warmth reminded me that I had built something worthy here. As much as I longed to fix things with Mark, I knew I couldn't sacrifice my dignity or my new purpose to do it. Winter's chill descended upon Seabrook, but the cafeteria remained vibrant. We offered hot soups, roasted root vegetables, and casseroles packed with protein. Each day felt like a new culinary puzzle as we fought the constraints of our budget. My YouTube channel continued to chronicle the journey. Students occasionally appeared off camera, their voices chiming with excitement over the day's menu. Then one of my videos unexpectedly went viral. It was a live streamed cooking demo where I walked viewers through making chicken stew on a large scale. I answered questions about nutrition, budgeting, and how to convince picky eaters to try new foods. The viewer count soared past anything I'd seen before, chat scrolling so fast I could barely keep up. After the stream, my channel's subscriber count leapt. Comments flooded in from around the country, some praising the idea of a senior citizen reinventing a school cafeteria, others seeking advice for their own communities. It was exhilarating but also unnerving. I'd never asked for fame, just a chance to do right by these kids. With the heightened attention, some viewers dug into my backstory. Rumors swirled about why I'd left Boston. A few found the older posts hinting at a family rift. Suddenly, I received sympathy messages praising my courage to leave a toxic environment. Others blasted Mark and Vanessa without knowing the full context. The situation felt messy, and I worried it might cause more rifts in my personal life. Principal Reed noticed the uptick in interest. If it brings in more resources for the cafeteria, that's great, he remarked over lunch one day. Just be cautious. Internet fame can be a double-edged sword. I assured him my focus remained on the students, not on fueling gossip about my family. Still, I braced for possible fallout. Sure enough, a few days later, Mark called, this time livid. What are you telling people? He demanded. Potential employers saw these posts, calling me an ungrateful son. They don't want that kind of drama. You're ruining my reputation. His accusations stung. I explained I never aired our personal issues in my videos, but the damage was done. The public's curiosity had spun its own narrative. I knew. He refused to listen, hurling blame my way. My hands shook as I held the phone. I flashed back to that motel room, the anguish of being cast out on my birthday. The fresh wave of guilt and hurt left me breathless. Did I owe it to Mark to dismantle my channel? Silence my story, just so he could repair his reputation? I didn't think so. Once the call ended, I found solace in the dorm kids, who beckoned me to watch their new dance routine. Their giggles soothed the ache in my chest. Later, I uploaded another video about healthy snack ideas, focusing on the positivity I aim to bring. If Mark's life was complicated by the public's reaction, that was out of my hands. I refused to let my past define my present or silence the good I was doing now. Snow dusted the streets of Seabrook, layering everything in a soft white hush. My life settled into a fulfilling routine: cooking, filming, dorm duty, and occasional moments of quiet reflection in my father's revitalized house. I'd fixed a few windows, replaced the front door, and even hung some cheerful curtains Maggie had helped me choose. Then, early one Saturday, I heard urgent knocking, opening the door. I froze at the sight of Mark and Vanessa. They looked worn down, dressed in thick coats. My heart lurched with conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, a dash of hope. Mark spoke first. Mom, we need to talk, please. I hesitated but stepped aside. Inside, they stood awkwardly in the living room. The tension was palpable. Vanessa glanced around at the modest but cozy interior, as if surprised I'd managed to carve out something decent here. Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking older than his 30-something years. We're about to lose our house, he admitted, voice tight. We need money to cover the mortgage and to pay for Jacob's tutoring. He's struggling in school. I was silent for a long moment, trying to gather my thoughts. Once, I would have rushed to give them everything, but the sting of betrayal still throbbed. I've used what little savings I had for repairs, I said quietly, and my paycheck goes into living expenses and the school. I can't just conjure thousands of dollars. Mark. Vanessa's eyes hardened. We apologized for that night, but can't you see we're desperate? Jacob needs you. We all do. Her tone bordered on accusatory, as though I'd caused their financial crisis. My jaw clenched. No real apology had been offered. They'd only admitted regret about the mushroom incident in passing. The deeper issues, how they treated me, remained untouched. Mark tried a gentler approach. Mom, come back with us. Live in our home again. We'll fix up the spare room. You can help with bills and watch Jacob. We can even launch a joint cooking channel. Feature you as Grandma's chef. You'd get more sponsors, and we could share the revenue. I stared at him, appalled at how transactional this had become. Just then, Maggie arrived, carrying a grocery bag. She stopped short upon seeing them, setting the bag down. Her gaze flicked to me, silently asking if I needed backup. I gave a slight nod, grateful for her presence. You must be Mark and Vanessa, she said, forcing a polite smile. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Mark looked away. Gugus? My voice trembled when I finally responded. I'm not returning to Boston. This is my home now. I've found a purpose here, beyond being an unpaid helper in your house. If you need support for Jacob, I suggest exploring scholarships or talking to the school counselor. Mark's shoulders sagged. Vanessa's face twisted in frustration, but neither could deny my resolve. They left shortly, the sound of the door clicking shut feeling strangely final. I sank onto the couch, exhaling a shaky breath. Maggie placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, and for the first time, I felt certain I had chosen the right path. Time flowed on, carrying the weight of old tensions into the realm of acceptance. Spring in Seabrook arrived with gentle rains that washed away the winter grime. In the school garden, we planted herbs, basil, parsley, and chives to enhance our cafeteria meals. The kids showed surprising enthusiasm, happily digging in the soil. Grandma Eve's cafeteria quest continued growing online, with viewers donating small amounts for better kitchenware. Carla and Steve, ever dedicated, embraced the new resources to experiment with more creative menus. Principal Reed beamed whenever he saw the lunch lines bustling. Attendance soared, and students seemed genuinely healthier. It felt like a small miracle accomplished through steady, collective effort. Meanwhile, Mark and Vanessa's situation was rumored to have deteriorated. They faced mounting debts and the specter of losing their home. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lie awake worrying about Jacob, but my attempts to reach out with gentle advice, like telling Mark about a local scholarship, were mostly rebuffed. I realized I couldn't force them to change. All I could do was remain open if Jacob needed me. My 64th birthday approached quietly. I mentioned it to no one, content to let the day pass with little fanfare. However, as I entered the school cafeteria that morning, the lights suddenly went dark. A dozen small voices yelled. Surprise! The lights came back on, revealing a homemade banner. Happy birthday, Miss Evelyn. My breath caught, tears threatening to spill. The children ushered me to a table where a cake stood slightly tilted, frosted with a shaky hand, but beautiful in its sincerity. Maggie hovered nearby with a grin, while Carla and Steve waved from behind the serving counter. Principal Reed clapped me on the shoulder. Take the day off from cooking. We'll handle lunch, he declared. The cheering that followed made my chest tighten with overwhelming gratitude. As we cut the cake, the kids giggled and told me what they liked best about the new meals: more veggies, less grease, and fun shapes of bread. Each heartfelt compliment was sweeter than any gift. I thought back to that lonely motel night a year ago, the strawberry shortcake from a kind receptionist. Here I was now, in a room brimming with love and laughter, having found a family that appreciated me for who I was. While sharing slices of cake, I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. Turning, I saw Jacob standing there, older and taller than I remembered. My heart lurched. "Grandma," he whispered, tears gathering in his eyes. "Dad drove me. He said it was your birthday, and I just wanted to see you. I miss you." I pulled him into a hug, tears spilling down my cheeks. He was still my grandson, and I was still his grandmother, no matter what Mark and Vanessa had done. Manitas. He stayed only a short while, offering me a small wrapped box containing a digital photo frame loaded with pictures of the two of us from past birthdays. Through trembling lips, I thanked him. As he left, I stood by the cafeteria window, watching him disappear into the parking lot. Turning around, I was greeted by the smiling faces of my students, my coworkers, and my friends, all radiating warmth I'd thought I'd lost forever. I realized then how far I'd come since that bitter night in Boston, and how this new life, rooted in small acts of care and community, was the gift I never knew I needed. Thank you so much for listening to her fireside stories tonight. Evelyn's journey reminds us all that it's never too late to start again, to rebuild, and to find the respect and love we deserve. Sometimes family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who stand by us when everyone else walks away. I hope Evelyn's story warmed your heart and perhaps even inspired you to embrace your own strength and dignity, no matter your circumstances. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to the channel. It helps immensely, and you won't miss the incredible stories coming soon. I'd also genuinely love to read your comments below. Tell me, what part touched you the most? And have you ever experienced something similar? Let's keep sharing these wonderful fireside moments together. Until next time, stay warm, stay kind, and always believe in second chances.